There's a lot of ways you can measure the success of a musician's career, and typically on this channel we are looking at country artists and looking at their artistic merit. What makes them a great artist? What do they have to say as a songwriter? We've talked about the most influential albums, and we've talked about how you prove your country music street cred and who would be on the Mount Credmore of country music. But today I thought it could be cool to remove any of the guesswork, remove any of the critical opinion, and just get down to the data and say, who is the best-selling country artist of all time? We don't gotta guess and argue whether it's Hank Williams or Patsy Cline or Johnny Cash that is the most influential country artist. We can just say who's legit sold the most records. And so that's what we're looking at today, the 10 best-selling country artists of all time. To make this list, I looked at charts provided by the RIAA, that's the Recording Industry Association of America. They're the organization responsible for certifying albums as gold for sales of 500,000, platinum for sales of 1 million, or diamond for sales of 10 million. And you can just go to their gold and platinum database, sort by artist, and see the best-selling artists of all time. And the best-selling artist of all time is the Beatles. They've sold collectively 183 million albums. But for the purposes of this video, I just looked at the country artists, and I'm gonna give you the top 10. And number 10 is Tim McGraw. Don't take the girl. Tim McGraw has sold approximately 37.5 million albums over the course of his career, and the biggest one was his 1994 blockbuster called Not a Moment Too Soon, which was the best-selling album of that entire year. And spoiler alert, a lot of the artists in this video, a lot of the best-selling artists of all time, did a lot of their sales in the 90s. The 90s were a time when music ownership skyrocketed. People loved going out and buying CDs, and so there were tons and tons and tons of the biggest albums of all time sold during that decade. Tim McGraw has always been very smart in the songs that he has chosen to record, and he's got a lot of diversity in his catalog. There's big hits like Indian Outlaw, songs like Don't Take the Girl, his biggest hit, Live Like You Were Dying. I went skydiving. And a number of duets like It's Your Love with his wife, Faith Hill. And while Faith hasn't sold enough albums to make the top 10 of this video, her career is still crazy. She's sold about 26 million albums of her own. At number 9 is Reba McEntire. She said, just be nice to the gentleman fancy, they'll be nice to you. Reba McEntire is a spunky legend of country music. Everyone recognizes her undeniable twang, her red hair, and her impressively long career. She first reached the top 20 on the country charts in the late 70s, and she has since gotten big hits in the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, the 2010s, and most recently she's featured on Thomas Rhett's song Be a Light, which also reached the top 20, which means in 6 separate decades, this woman has had a top 20 country hit. Her biggest of those hits is her iconic duet with Linda Davis, Does He Love You, about two women that are both seeing the same man. Does he love you? Does he love you like he loves me? But she's got so many other showstoppers like The Night the Lights Went Out in Georgia. That's the night that the lights went out in Georgia. And Fancy, which at the time only reached number 8, but has probably become her most enduring and iconic hit. All along the way, Reba has sold and sold and sold and sold albums. She's had her own TV shows, she's hosted award shows, and she remains a staple of the country music community. And number 8 is Alan Jackson. But it's alright to be a little bitty, a little hometown or a Alan Jackson has sold about 43.5 million albums over the course of his career, and just like Tim McGraw, he was one of the kings of 90s country. I mean, sometimes I look back at Alan Jackson with his mustache and mullets and cutoffs and think that from a cool standpoint, he really had the same heat on him that someone like Morgan Wallen has today. But unlike Morgan, who I would say pushes a lot more in the pop direction, Alan Jackson was part of the neo-traditional wave that was driven by artists like Randy Travis. Alan Jackson found a way to make that neo-traditional sound party-hardy and fun, and on his blockbuster album, A Lot About Livin' and a Little About Love, he had raucous hits like Chattahoochee and Little Bitty that you will still hear played at parties to this day. But he's not a one-trick pony. He can go really beautiful and sentimental on ballads like Remember When, or totally laid back and chill on songs like It's 5 O'Clock Somewhere with Jimmy Buffett. At number 7, and no whining about this one, it's Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift is the youngest person on this list by a long shot, but she has still managed to sell 45 million albums over the course of her career. And while she may identify as a pop star these days, especially on her recent albums 1989 and Reputation and Lover, You can't deny that she got her start in the country world, calling herself a country star, and while her music has always been inflected by pop, she was making country music at the start of her career. And actually, I think if you look at some of the biggest women in country history, there's always been a willingness to go more in the pop direction than some of the men. And in some ways, that kind of makes sense to me because country music produces a lot more male stars.
Oh, they got boobs. They're not a man. We can't play you. Get out of here. It's like, what happened?
But when a female star becomes a superstar in country music, they become stratospherically huge to the point that other audiences, even outside of country, want music from them. And that's definitely been the case with Taylor Swift. I mean, all the way back to her first songs with Tim McGraw and Our Song, this young songwriter was offering a confident, self-assured, funny, feminine perspective, and it was clearly missing from the country music landscape because of how big her first two albums were. Fearless, her sophomore album, is her biggest album out of her whole catalog. It sold 12 million copies worldwide and had songs like Love Story on it. Taylor Swift even won Album of the Year and Entertainer of the Year in 2009 based off that album.
I will never forget this moment.
And as we all know, and I've talked about it on the channel a bunch of times, she made the move to pop. Whatever genre she's calling herself, I think it's pretty clear that she is one of the biggest artists of this lifetime across all musical landscapes, right there with like Adele and Beyonce. And number 6 is Alabama. I think this one will probably surprise a lot of people just because when you think of powerhouse sellers, you tend to think of individual artists more than you think of bands. But Alabama, especially in the 80s, was one of the hugest bands you could ever imagine. And over the course of their career, they have sold about 46.5 million albums. Alabama is just a likable band. They've got great harmonies, they've got so much energy, there's southern rock vibes in there, there's a little bit of Bakersfield, and on songs like Mountain Music, Dixieland Delight, and if you're gonna play in Texas, you gotta have a fiddle in the band. You just gotta sing along with them. And I should say, if you're younger, you don't know who Alabama are, and you're like, why do they have these Confederate flags all over their albums? They stopped using the Confederate flag in any of their album covers or marketing materials in 1984 with their album Roll On, and have long since tried to disassociate that from their brand. Okay, at number 5, we got Kenny Rogers.
You got to know when to hold up, know when to fold.
Kenny Rogers was really quietly a powerhouse sales behemoth. He sold over 47.5 million albums over the course of his career, which tragically ended earlier this year with his death. Kenny Rogers was never super in-your-face, twangy, or rocking. It was always a little bit more of a soft pop rock influence type of country music, but there was a lot of diversity within his catalog even so. I mean, he's known best for his iconic hit, The Gambler, but then he also sang over the years many times with Dolly Parton on songs like Islands in the Stream, and he had huge hits with Lady and Coward of the County as well. He was a true legend, and we miss him. At number 4, we've got Shania Twain. Shania Twain has sold over 48 million albums in her career, and for as much talk as there is about Taylor Swift being this pop country wonderkind, that was really Shania Twain 20 years earlier. From the moment Shania stepped foot onto the scene with songs like Whose Bed Have Your Boots Been Under and Any Man of Mine, people were intrigued, they were annoyed at how poppy she was, and all that conversation, when mixed with the truly great songs she was putting out that were produced so expertly by her now ex-husband Mutt Lange, you just got this career explosion.
Let's go, girls.
I think what's amazing about Shania's place on this list is she has not put out many albums. She really put out 3 huge albums in a 7-year span, and that is what drove the vast majority of her sales. The Woman in Me, released in 1995, sold 10 million copies. Come On Over, released in 1997, sold over 20 million copies, and it stands as the best-selling country album of all time. Come On Over, which had singles like You're Still the One, That Don't Impress Me Much, and Man, I Feel Like a Woman,
Man, I feel like a woman,
was so big that the label decided to release 12 singles from it. Most albums have like 3 or 4 singles. They released 12. Her 2002 album Up was also certified 11 times platinum. And after that, Shania Twain took a big break. You can read all sorts of things about that, about her divorce, about her losing her voice, about her Vegas residency, and coming back. She did come back with a new album in 2017 called Now. It was not the hit that these other albums are. It did not make the same kind of splash, and that's okay. no one is shaking a stick at Shania Twain's iconic career up to that point. Before I jump into the top 3, let's go back to the beginning of the list and do 5 honorable mentions. At number 15 is the lovable 90s duo Brooks and Dunn. Songs like Neon Moon and Boot Scootin' Boogie have helped these guys sell over 27 million albums. At number 14 is Linda Ronstadt. Linda Ronstadt is someone that doesn't come up in as many country conversations, but she had a huge career with big hits like You're No Good and When Will I Be Loved, and she sold over 30 million albums. At number 13 is the king of margaritas and beach country and no shoes, no shirt, no problems, Mr. Kenny Chesney. Kenny Chesney has sold about 31 million albums. At number 12 is one of the pioneers of the outlaw movement and someone that might be smoking a doobie right now. It's Willie Nelson. Willie Nelson has sold close to 32 million albums over the course of his storied career. And then at number 11 is a group that is about to make a big comeback, and so they may be moving up this list in the future. It's the Dixie Chicks. Incredibly, with only 3 albums under their belt, the Dixie Chicks have sold 33 million albums with giant hits like Wide Open Spaces. And now let's get back into the countdown at number 3 with the king himself, George Strait. George Strait has sold 69 million albums, and I know what you're thinking. Nice. And like so many other artists on this list, a bunch of those were sold in the 90s. 1996's Clear Blue Sky and 1997's Carrying Your Love With Me are his biggest sellers, and he has had a whole bunch of hits. And I know you know him. All My Exes Live in Texas, and Check Yes or No, and Oceanfront Property. George Strait has actually had 45 number 1s on Billboard's country songs chart, the most of any artist ever. And number 2 is Dolly Parton.
Jolene, 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 Jolene.
Dolly Parton is someone that wasn't actually on the RIAA database that I was pulling all my info for the rest of this video, and that confused me. I mean, I kept loading and loading and loading pages and was like, Dolly Parton has been famous for an extremely long time. She's released so much music. She's one of the icons of pop culture. Why is she not on this list? And I don't know the answer to that question. I did find a bunch of articles from 2014 where she received this special award for selling 100 million records worldwide. So I'm confused because they've recognized her before, but for some reason she's not here. So I don't know if there's some kind of weird label politics or something going on there. There's an article in a publication called Work and Money by Claire Gillespie that came to the same conclusion I did, and they included her, and so I felt empowered to say, yeah, I'm putting Dolly at number 2. Exactly how many records has she sold? I don't know, but it's over 100 million. You really don't have to think very hard to name a bunch of huge, famous Dolly Parton hits. Here You Come Again, 9 to 5. Oh, this little one called I Will Always Love You. Probably more than any other star on this list, she leveraged her success in the country music world into acting, into a theme park, Dollywood, that employs thousands of people. She's one of the biggest humanitarians in the entire music landscape. Everyone loves Dolly Parton, and a whole bunch of people have bought a Dolly Parton album. But at number 1, the very best-selling country artist of all time and one of the best-selling artists of all time, second place only to the Beatles, it's Garth Brooks.
Well, I guess I was wrong. I just don't belong there.
The sales total for Garth Brooks dwarfs pretty much all the other competition. He has sold over 156 million albums. Going all the way back to his self-titled debut album in 1989, Garth Brooks has had 8 different albums certified diamond. His best-selling single album is No Fences, which had some of his biggest hits. I'm talking Friends in No Places, and Unanswered Prayers, and The Thunder Rolls. That album alone shipped 18 million units. All through the 90s, Garth maintained an incredible momentum and incredible sales power. He also proved in that time to be an extremely savvy businessman, and Garth Brooks throughout his career has continually re-released his music in greatest hits collections or in box sets. It's not dissimilar to how Disney used to have The Vault, and they would put a movie away for a few years and then re-release it to drive sales. Garth has always done the same thing, and some people feel annoyed by it, like, okay, here's Garth cashing in again, and other people are like, dude, you do you and you make your money. Garth is pretty famously against streaming as well until he recently signed an exclusive deal with Amazon where his latest album has been up for pre-order for like 2 years. And while that decision may mean that he doesn't have as many younger fans that want to listen to their favorite artist on Spotify or Apple Music, he's good at selling albums, and you gotta give him that.
I like that.
On the whole, I think Garth is such a major positive for country music. He's so fun to watch. I mean, in his whole Chris Ledoux style of running around the stage, and he's dynamic and he's charismatic as a singer. Credit where credit is due. The guy has sold more albums than Elvis Presley.
And I really like that.
And so that's it. That's the list of the best-selling country artists of all time. Are you surprised by anyone on this list? I can definitely say I was most surprised by Alabama, but I'd love to know who you were surprised by, and of these artists, whose music do you actually like the most? So let me know that stuff in the comments, and a bunch more things coming at you soon. Love y'all. Bye.